All right, so I'm in the middle of tearing down my home studio setup. I basically was doing everything in the box for mixing. This is primarily a mixing room for me, as well as I have a handful of the gear from my last studio candle in here, which hasn't really gotten much use down here because I don't do a lot of recording. In this basement, I have been working at a new studio called Witchwood Sound, not too far away from here. They have tons of gear. I might bring a couple things there eventually, but I mostly just brought my amps, my pedals, some furniture and stuff like that. As far as outboard gear, we're pretty stacked there. There's not really much more room for stuff. I have a lunchbox and a old Altec mixer preamp thing that I'll be bringing in there next month for two records I'm working on, Bonnie Trash and Bad Waitress. So there's an extra 8 channels at the studio for me to plug in my lunchbox. I also have some Bantam to XLR cables that I can plug in an extra preamp or compressor. I think I might actually bring my Brent Averill pre because I just love it for vocals. They have newer Neve style pre's there. It's like an 8 channel, I think it's maybe AWS. So far I've used them on drums there and a bunch of other things, and they sound killer. Honestly, like I would be totally fine to use those on vocals, but I am really curious about bringing this guy in to do the vocals on, and maybe I can do a quick A-B while I'm there with some malting, or just a quick example or two from the singer. Yeah, so I'm gonna bring that in for next month because I'll be doing a bunch of days in the studio in a row. I'll probably bring a little bit more stuff and leave it there for the month. The biggest reason why I'm tearing apart this home setup is I had all my outboard in these racks on the desk, which was nice. But again, I'm not really doing vocals here. Not really recording guitars. The only thing I have really recorded down here since I set all this up is my synth stuff. And I don't need preamps for that. I can just go line in somehow. And I've been really kind of interested in being able to use some of my outboard during the mix. And I kind of gotten back into the 500 series. I sold a couple 19-inch things to get a lunchbox and a couple API pre's. I even sold my 4-channel API pre as well. Again, I don't currently have my own studio that I'm recording bands and artists in. So currently right now I'm in this kind of weird middle ground where I don't need as much gear as I had at my last place, but at the same time I don't want to get rid of all of it. Because I do sort of plan on building a studio at some point. I don't think it will be in Toronto, but maybe in a number of years it'll be somewhere outside of the city, or maybe it'll be Toronto, who knows. But currently I have a place that I'm working out of that I really like, and it's a great situation for me. And then the other reason why I want to hold on to some of this outboard gear, like my distressor and the Stam 1176, this Altec thing that's coming back from the shop, even the Warm Audio Paultec I really like, and of course this 500 rack that quickly grew again by selling some other stuff. I really wanted to try using some of this in my mixes, and this could be a really bad idea. So I was trying to run some of my stuff, some of the stuff out of the in the box to some of this outboard, and I was having a lot of issues with latency. And I've watched like 3 different videos of all these really helpful people online that sort of make, these kind of YouTube like videos that I'm, I guess, going to try to start doing more of. I mean, this is extremely raw, unedited, very much like stream of consciousness, walking through what's going on in my head. Some people really don't like that. I understand. I think that eventually I'll start making more professional videos where I really highly edit these and, really clean cuts and whatever. But I think it might be kind of cool to have a few of these in the beginning where these are like kind of the early initial stage videos. And there's a couple people I've watched online that sort of do this, and a lot of the comments are that they don't like this sort of format because they're unnecessarily long. But I really kind of enjoy them because it's very real, and it's also very much what I think a lot of audio people, creative types, whatever, this specific kind of world of like setting up a studio, whether it's just a mix room or like a large facility. Like this stuff is like, it drives you nuts. It's such a rabbit hole. And even when you set something up and it works for a while, you get bored or you find it uninspiring and you want to change things up. So that's kind of what's happening with me here right now is, I'm 100% in the box. And at the end of the day, maybe that is the smartest time-saving way of doing things, because I do really jump between a lot of projects. Like on a given day, I'll be opening up revisions for one band and then jumping to the next, and so doing stuff with Outboard, it might be a terrible idea. It might really slow things down. The stuff that I have bought for the 500 series is stuff that I very much will love to use for tracking. Not every project, if I'm doing a recording day where it's more production based and I am mostly just setting up a bunch of instruments and it's more about creative flow than, spending like an hour on a guitar sound, then I'm probably not going to bring like my EQs. And again, there is a few things, they have like 6 outboard EQs. A couple 550Bs and some of these Heritage Audio Neve style EQs. So there's like more than enough to play with there. But like the records I'm going to do next month, Bad Waitress and Bonnie Trash, like they're big, like they're very much guitar rock centric bands where, the song's already figured out. I'm going to be there co-producing, speaking up whenever I feel it's necessary or whenever they want my opinion on something. But it's less production and more just me being a very good engineer and getting the best sounds out of the band as possible. And, and just quality control. If anything sounds wonky, or just something I really feel passionately about speaking to what's going on, then I'll speak up. But so like sessions like that, I really want to have a lot of EQs. Like I just been really realizing lately, and maybe this is just kind of the thing I'm into at the moment, but when I did have my old studio and I originally had a console on the upstairs, and it was an old Studer board, and it was 24 mic pre's, 24 EQs. And when we first opened the studio, there was a lot of live tracking, and it was just such a great feeling to have all those channels come through the board and being able to put like a really decent analog EQ on every single channel. And, a lot of people are more purists or just have the idea that, it's all about the mic. It's like, if you're not getting the sound you want from the mic, like switch up the mic. I've never been as much of a microphone person. I just don't find them as exciting to use as an equalizer. I have my basic workhorse mics, and people have brought stuff in the studio. I've been able to play with different things over the years. They're also really delicate, and I'm a little bit scared to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on microphones and have one drop or break or whatever it is. And I've had issues with like tube mics and noise and stuff. So, I have my dynamics. I have one really good, condenser from Stam that I got recently. Like it's like an 87 clone thing, but it's based off like a vintage 87, but with a tube. So I've been enjoying that so far. But yeah, so I kind of got into this thing of like, wow, like I really miss having analog EQs. Like I love, being able to tone shape things, especially when you're more on the engineering side of things versus producing. And, a lot of your job really is like helping sculpt the sound. So I started getting 550As from API again, and my dream was to get 6. Well, I mean, my dream at one point is a 1608, which is, their first, large format console. But realistically, 6 EQs would be great, because what I want to be able to do is run stems out from Pro Tools and, have the flexibility to do like, either guitar, drums left and right, or like kick and snare, guitars, and then like a bass and a vocal. Maybe even eventually 8 would be cool, because you could do kick snare whole kit, but that's kind of unnecessary. So like 6 EQs would be amazing. And I really wanted to try a hardware bus compressor. So the other reason I kind of like grabbed these things recently was because both these EQs went up for a really good deal that I just couldn't pass up. And same with this. These aren't the most popular, obviously, because there's a lot of other options right now out there. But this Stam SSL style compressor, I've watched videos online of it comparing to the new SSL one, and they're different sounding, but it really comes down to taste. I would say like they're on par. The consensus from all the videos I watched was this was a little bit more heavier in the compression, but it has the ability to be more subtle if you back it off. Less sheen, but more weight. So, if both were up for the same price used or something like that, it would have been more of a toss-up. But someone was selling one of these locally for like a ridiculously good price. So I just had to grab it, and I really, really wanted to try it out. I've been using plugins, and maybe it's just a knob thing and a meter, watching a meter. Who knows? Like I'll do some tests, and we'll see how much it does compare. But for the price, it was like half of what this thing would be new, or even less than that. So I just had to try it out. So basically, my plan was that I wanted to run stems out to this stuff, and I currently have a Dangerous D box, which has 8 channels of summing. So I was trying to run things in parallel in Pro Tools, having lots of latency issues. I was trying to compensate for the delay time. It was not working. I could get it close, and it seemed to be okay as a hardware insert. I wasn't really hearing, the shift, because it wasn't combating with the original source. It was just combating with all the other tracks. So yeah, but I really, the problem with the outboard thing is the recall. So I'm trying to find this like best of both worlds situation, which, it might not, well, I think I can make it exist. So basically, I can run 8 channels into the summing section of this, print my mix. Cool. The problem with that is the recall. So if I run all my main stems, say like drums, bass, vocals, guitars, whatever, synths, run that into some of my outboard, into these 8 slots, print the mix. I'm going to have to go back and recall if I want to change anything in the mix. 'Cause what I'm going to be doing is just printing a mix back in to Pro Tools. And that is like part of what like summing is all about, is that you're summing all the channels into the analog domain to an analog 2 bus and back into Pro Tools. I don't think that that's going to work for me in the long run. I know that you are then losing a little bit of the benefit of analog summing, but at the end of the day, I just know how picky every client is, and they're always going to want a revision. So I really don't think I want to go back to having to recall this stuff. That being said, I also specifically got these EQs, not only because I love the sound of them. I mean, they really are awesome. They have such a euphoric and awesome musical sound to them, but they're stepped. So if I did decide I could maybe get into recall, I think it's doable with these, but as soon as I want to start adding, my Stam 1176 on the vocal, or, my, I don't know, snare drum or vocal or something, second compressor on the vocal for the distressor, maybe the Paultec on the vocal, or, one or two of these on the bass or something, then it's getting into a lot of recall. And yeah, so I think, and especially if you're going song to song, I just think that's going to be pretty tough. So I was looking into options, and I've been eyeing the SSL X-Desk. And the studio owner of the studio I've been working at has been trying to sell it. It's been sitting in a drawer. So, I was really curious about it. I told him I was like interested in it, but I just don't know if it's going to work out for me, etc. And he was like, basically, well, it's sitting in a drawer right now, waiting to get sold. Why don't you try it out? And if it doesn't work for you, then just give it back to me. And if it works for you, then, great, I'll figure it out. And if I do that, what I'll probably do is get rid of the D-Box to help fund that, because I would then just use the X-Desk as my monitor controller. I mean, right now, this is just a monitor controller for me, and, I haven't really even used the summing yet, so it's got headphones. That's all I'm really using it for. So basically, because Pro Tools is so annoying with the delay compensation, I think the easiest way to send my stuff into the outboard would be via a summing mixer. Like, I could send individual stuff just straight to the outboard, but I think it would get maybe a little bit complicated, because I would have to have a piece of outboard for everything that I'm sending out. Because if you're sending out to outboard, you want like everything in Pro Tools going to that. You don't want like some channels staying in the DAW and then other channels going out, because again, you'll have the latency issue. Some people online seem to not have as hard of a time with that, but I don't know. I hear it and it sounds a bit phasey. Again, the hardware insert thing, for those who don't know what that is, you just run it out of your DAW and back in, and you're just kind of replacing, the original source with this strapped onto it. That seems to sound okay, because, you're not having to like split the signal essentially in parallel. But again, that will require total like recall for every song I have to do. So then there's the X-Desk, where I could run everything into that, and then I'm kind of back to the same situation where I'd have to print the mix via the bus. And it's got some really handy things like inserts on the 2 bus, all that, etc. But then I watched a video online of someone who's doing a hybrid setup with this thing. And what they do is, because this thing has direct outs as well as the 2 bus, they sort of split the difference of what the whole point of the summing thing is which is they run their stems out to this, they do all the analog processing that they want to do, and then they record like the 8 or 16. It actually has 16 channels, but I don't have enough room on my Patchbay to do 16, so I'm gonna just start with 8. And plus, I don't really have much more than 8 pieces of outboard anyway. So he runs everything into that, and then you can record the direct outs on new channels. So essentially what you do is you have your in the box mix, you've worked on it, you've done what you needed to do so far, and then you can run into this mixer, do all your processing, and then record those channels back onto it, and back onto Pro Tools. And then from there, you've done what you wanted to do in the outboard realm. You've added these like nice, whatever, EQs and compressors if you have them. And then if, the band or artist is like, okay, can we still get the kick drum up, or, can we still have this vocal duck a little bit in the second verse or whatever it is, first verse, then you can easily just do that. So it's like you're just kind of like replacing the original stems that you had in your DAW with new analog processed ones. And at that point, like, you don't really have to have them line up. You can just remove the old ones, or, hide them or freeze them or whatever. Just start working off the analog chain. And if the client really doesn't like what you did in the analog chain, then you could always just go back to the digital. But this is how the mastering engineer I use a lot, Noah Mintz, does mastering. It's like, he does his analog thing, which takes time or whatever, and then he starts adding a little bit of digital. And then when he sends you the master, if you're mostly happy with it, he's going to keep everything he did in the analog domain and just tweak from there, which saves obviously a lot more time. If you're really unhappy with the master, he's going to have to go back and redo all the outboard stuff again. But his sort of goal is like, okay, use the outboard, print it in real time. It's worth that process. And then once that's done, you're mostly just doing like some final, maybe graphic EQ sweeps in the box, you're limiting, etc. So that's what I'm going to try doing with this. I don't know what the process is going to be like exactly, if I'm going to, do a lot of prep work in the box first and then sort of move on to the analog thing, or maybe I'll start in the analog domain quite early, and get that stuff in there, and then maybe I won't have to work as hard in the box afterwards. Because I was doing some tests, and I was A/Bing like the real EQs versus the plugin versions, and like the real compressors versus the plugin. And honestly, like, it's unfortunate to say this, but there is a difference. I know we're at that point where everyone thinks that it's about the same, and it is so close. And I think if you record your music with really good equipment going in, especially if we're talking about like, music that is like acoustic based and not like, electronic based with mostly like samples. But if you're recording, a band with drums, guitars, vocals, bass, etc., acoustics, and and you're using like good mics, good outboard, it's recorded well, then I think, you don't necessarily need to go out of the box after that. I think you can just finish it off with plugins. But I think one of the issues I'm having too is that because so many people are trying to record from home these days, they're sending me stuff that was just recorded with a pretty whatever mic into a very sterile interface, no character, no outboard, nothing's hitting transformers or tubes. So I'm finding a lot of stuff that people are sending me these days, it's not recorded how I would like it to be, and it's just sterile. And, and then if you're just trying to get that character in the box, it becomes this like fighting match a little bit. And I think it is totally doable, and I have been doing it, and maybe I'll try all this and realize it's so negligible that it's not worth it. But I think by running, especially things that weren't recorded amazingly, into, this outboard that has like, transformers and tubes, and again, and some of it just sounds so good. Like, these EQs are just, they add so much magic and weight. And the other thing is that not only am I sort of doing it for a sonic sound purpose, it's not as if I'm totally not happy with my mixes. I think one trap a lot of people get into with this stuff is that they're looking to buy this gear and hoping it's going to be this night and day difference to improve their skills, and that's just not really what it's going to do. I mean, when you do get into this high-end stuff and you throw whatever source into it, you will hear a difference. It will, it's not, it's not, what's the word? It's not a hoax. Like, it is real, and like it does affect the tone, and it does sound, slightly better. But the other reason why I want to do this is I find, because I have to mix so much stuff in one go, this might be kind of naive, but I'm also hoping this will like streamline my work a little bit, because I do find the more outboard that you're working on with sources, the quicker the results. So I'm just feeling like I might actually be able to save myself time by being able to run even at least just my stems through some of my really nice outboard and back in. And I'm kind of hoping that it will streamline my workflow, because you'll get to the sound quicker, I find, with outboard. And also there's limitations with outboard and there's less options. So, you know, every time you open a mix, you're like, okay, what EQ should I use on the bass? What EQ should I use on the guitars? It's like, if you're committing to, you know, the EQs that you have, the bus compressor that you have, all that stuff, and like, this is what I use on, you know, I use that EQ on my vocal and that compressor on my vocal. I just think that it will really streamline things for me. You know, there will be some extra time added because, you know, you're running out into the stuff, doing more tweaking, and you have to print in real time. But in the end, I actually am very curious if this will actually save me time. And, you know, because it's just like anything, right? You know, if you have a billion guitar pedals or a billion amps and a billion guitars, like, you sometimes having limitations just gets the job done, and it's not sacrificing anything. It's just actually being productive. And, you know, this gear is nothing to, you know, scoff at. It's all good stuff. So I don't think having those limitations will be a bad thing on any source. And, you know, if there's some projects where I just feel like it's not necessary, then I won't go out and bother with the outboard. Maybe I'll just use a little bit on the 2-bus. You know, it might be a per project basis. I think some of the electronic stuff I work on might not, it might have its benefit. You know, especially if things are very digital in the box and sterile, and it needs a little bit of like analog mojo, but excuse me, but I'm just getting over a cold here. But the some of the, you know, the more modern electronic music, like, sometimes I think it benefits from staying in the box because of just like the transients and, you know, how fast some stuff is in the box. You know, when you're going into some of this outboard, like transformers and some of that stuff, I find slows the sound down a little bit, and that's what we love about it. But I think for like when I'm doing anything like band based, you know, like with like let's say rock but alternative indie, I think the outboard will really have its benefits, because that's when you're dealing with, you know, acoustic based instruments that need a little bit more enhancing than, say, like a perfect sample of a kick drum in, you know, a dance track. So yeah, so right now I am sort of moving things around to see if I think I have just enough points in my Patchbay to basically wire this thing in and just kind of get a feel for the workflow. You know, I'll have to put some of this rack gear back into the rack to also utilize it. So that will be a little bit of a process. I was kind of hoping I could have just left some of this in the rack, but it's just kind of annoying to have to get into this Patchbay with everything wired in. So, and because I want my 500 series rack in there now, all that other stuff that was in there is going to have to go in my big 2-slot rack there. So my goal is to get the X-Desk in, wired up. I'll have my 4 550As. I'll have the 5 112s, which are preamps, but I could still run into them for some of the transformer character, op amps, etc. And then I have the SSL as well. Oh, so that was the other thing I forgot to mention was, so if I do this sort of halfway summing in between thing, what's going to happen is I'm actually not going to be sending my mix to the 2-bus. You know, I could record the 2-bus as well, and, you know, have it in Pro Tools, but realistically, I'm going to have to go back and make adjustments. So the sort of happy middle ground is I'm going to lose some of the analog summing, headroom, whatever it is, you know, magic that's happening on the 2-bus. because I'm just going to be recording the direct outs of the X-Desk from all the outboard back into Pro Tools. And then from there, when from there, whether it's when the client is happy with the mix, or maybe as soon as I start bringing all the stuff back into Pro Tools, I'm then going to hopefully strap on the SSL, maybe the 550s again, because that's another benefit of doing it this way, is that if I don't use the 2-bus on the X-Desk when I'm doing the analog mix, then I can use all that stuff on the individual channels. And then once that's recorded back in, I can then go on a hardware insert in Pro Tools. I could do, my mix into this pair, do some cutting and boosting into the stem for some glue, and then a final EQ. I mean, I know these aren't really super known for 2-mix because they're 2 dB steps, but I could also make sure I create enough headroom for that. But so that's kind of cool. Like, I mean, you're then doing your master bus processing as a hardware insert in Pro Tools, but then you get to use this gear again that you didn't, that you've already got to print. So I think that, like, I think you might lose a little 1% analog goodness of the 2-bus summing, but at the end of the day, I think that what's going on here is the ability to send to the outboard in a very streamlined way. You can do some fader stuff if you want. You can do some trimming of the channels, effect sends, which I don't know if I'm going to really do. Maybe even get into some creative stuff where you like cut channels, back in. And yeah, I mean, it is a glorified sort of center place card for all this stuff, and being able to just make sure that everything from Pro Tools goes in, and you don't have just certain stuff staying in the box and certain stuff going there again, because then you'll have latency. So gonna try it out. Sonically, I mean, we'll have to see what the benefits are, but even if the sonic benefits is 1% better, or it's the exact same, I am really curious about the workflow, because I think that is something that people have to really realize. Like, I know, this stuff costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time to build up this stuff. If you're primarily just doing this for a living, like I have for the last 12 years, it takes a long time to build up this gear. You'll have a lot of people online who are obviously, don't have this stuff and are just using plugins, and will just, make the comment of like, well, it only sounds like a little bit better. I can't hear the difference. So, and that's a really fair argument, but we do have to kind of consider the workflow. And if this workflow is cumbersome and it's a nightmare, then, I made a mistake. I can give this back. I'm still going to keep all this gear. I might not keep the SSL, but because I got it at such a good deal, I could easily sell it. But like, I'm not getting rid of those EQs. I love bringing them to the studio to track with. They're great. And I'm not getting rid of the other outboard. So this was a really good situation where I just had to do a couple trades for some extra D-sub snakes. I get to try this out for free, and, it will take a little time to just wire it up, but I think it's worth it. And I'm really excited about trying this workflow. I think it might streamline things for me. And I think, it's more about being in the box for the last number of years. It does get a little bit boring, I think. You're using a mouse and a keyboard the entire time, and you do sometimes feel like you're not really, touching or feeling the music as much when you're just using a keyboard and mouse. And because I've been doing it for so long, again, maybe that is just the most streamlined way to do it. But I want to feel the music again. And I want to go back to when I had a full band coming into the board, and I was able to really just shape things. And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I want to try it. I think they're all pretty valid. And, if I would have had to just buy this and try it out, it would have been a harder decision. But having that hookup of the lend is really, really helping me out. And then if I do keep it, the X-Desk is going to take up a lot of my Patchbay. So what I'm going to have to do is run all my synths into my 4710 via ADAT. So that's not going to go into the Patchbay anymore, but that's totally fine. basically all my synths will go in via ADAT. They'll be separate from the Patchbay. I won't be able to run them into any of the outboard, but, oh no, actually, sorry, I will. It'll just have to be after Pro Tools. So, you know, if I want to get into like mixing some of my techno stuff on the board, I would just send the outputs of Pro Tools into that, and then I can start strapping on the gear. So it's cool. I mean, I'm really excited to try this. So this is my extremely long, you know, stream of consciousness with, you know, no editing video of all this, what's going through my process. I'll let you know how it goes. And over the next while, I'm going to try to do more videos and better, higher quality. I'm going to try to do some videos at the actual tracking studio, which is brighter and bigger, and, you know, might do like a mixing tutorial, might do like a drum workshop. So yeah, thanks for actually listening to all this if you did. You know, if you were ever curious about any of this stuff, hopefully that's helpful and for now, and hopefully I can give you some results in the next couple months and let you know how this whole this whole workflow change will be for me, and the benefits, the pros and cons. Okay, cheers.